Many actions affecting our lives deeply took place after TM reached our house that day. An hour later, the river valley roared again as the yellow biplane rose from the island, waggled its wings, and headed downriver. TM moved swiftly, first calling grandmother to come to care for the children. When she arrived, he left with Vida for Little Rock, where she was admitted to the state mental hospital. He retrieved the car, came back, and arranged to sell the land, the house, and the stock. He then loaded much of our possessions on a trailer, took me with him, and drove downstate to the low country town where he had been working. We stayed in a small boarding hotel with a work partner, and he put me to work as a helper for the rest of the summer on painting, roofing, and high work. Aside from one day at Norfolk Dam at 86 cents an hour, this was my first real job with grown-ups. A few weeks later, Vida having seemingly recovered, he rented a place to live, brought Vida from the mental hospital, and fetched the children from Baxter County, freeing Grandmother Ivy to return to Kansas. Soon, TM bought 20 swampy acres with a house next to a rice mill. He cleaned up the dilapidated two-room house and moved us in. By his manner, he now considered all family problems solved, perhaps permanently. After the novelty of this town and area faded, I quickly became an exile, homesick already for rocky timbered ridges and clear mountain water. This town, Stuttgart, was set in the Grand Prairie, rich farming country for rice and soybeans. Dad bought me a bicycle to ride to school, giving me some mobility, but I felt hemmed in by the monotonous expanse of row crop and rice paddy. Most timber was dozed to the far horizon where a fringe of cypress might signal a muddy bayou. At home, we suffered from the constant mosquitoes, the fine black ash from the rice mill's burnt rice hulls, and the noise and dust of passing mill trucks. None of this bothered Dad, who was mostly off working. His jolly manner told me that this place suited him, kept him happy with plenty of work for pocket money, lots of new cronies to talk and shoot billiards with, ample low-country shooting and fishing. It jolted me to realize clearly how much we differed. We had been so close in my early years. Despite a love for wild physical nature, he was now a confirmed gregarious town man. This rift across which we loved each other would widen with the years as he adopted more local culture and dropped his old standards. But I remained aloof and apart from the town life and stayed so my last 3 years of school. Part of this reaction came from the years of constant moving about, part from dislike of the local town atmosphere. German farmer immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries had developed the town and area. The town showed little of Southern architecture, manners, or quaintness, but did demonstrate a keen class consciousness mixed with venality and a strong racial and ethnic prejudices. World War II benefited the locality greatly, both from the federal government as ready market for food crops and fiber, and from the commerce with the pilot training field near the town. With the war's end, the training base was demolished, demobilized, and a local owner began an aviation training and crop spraying service, converting a few of the planes and hiring a few pilots. Now the expanding money crop economy moved toward export, demanding extra dozer work for more crop acreage, irrigation reservoirs, canals, high-volume irrigation equipment, as well as seed mills, storage elevators, and the like. Prosperity fostered the public desire for shooting sport. Located on the Mississippi Flyway, the area was long famous for its waterfowl shooting. Soon commercial hunt clubs dotted the landscape, making a nice source of off-season income for landowners. The town became known for its annual festival and duck calling contest. A Hollywood film star or two always visited and always shot their limits. So post-war materialism set the whole tone, and then seemingly overnight television sets arrived and TM got busy erecting antennas, a job he did safely and efficiently with minimum tackle and rigging. As a young and callous witness to all of this, often working with Dad or accompanying him, I couldn't help noticing the town's social ranking. There seemed hardly any old families at all, except some of the earlier German farmers. A descending socio-economic scale ran from mill owners and top personnel to wealthy, often absentee landowners, to professionals and local government officials, to well-off business and shop owners, to white skilled workers, to farm overseers and white farm workers, and finally to the blacks, getting by on 50 cents an hour for men, a few dollars a week in cast-off clothing for women domestic. In a perverse way, the landscape could illustrate this. The highest point around was a cemetery for whites, only a few feet above the muck and puddles of the blacks' ghetto, but an immense distance socially and economically. How many levels can a gar pool contain? I'm sure it was somewhat unfair, but in my youthful loathing, I regarded the town as an active puddle of ganoid fishes. At that prickly stage of adolescence, any real or fancied slight settled on me like nettle rash. I burned for popularity with local girls, but quickly picked up a sense of social shame over my family's relative rating in this aura of materialism. Instead of capitalizing on new boy status to date some of the desirable ones, I stiff-armed them with a pose of chilly superiority. However, the whites-only high school had facilities better than anything at Norfolk, with teachers better for me in many ways, except that of personal attention. I reacted wrongly, relapsing into my loner stance from early years. To compensate, I read endlessly in the school library. The other students were talking about and excitedly scanning just one book for its sex scenes. Kathleen Windsor's historical romance, Forever Amber. Curious, I pulled out the single copy one day. It fell open limply, the pages utterly smudged and blackened from handling. During my 3 years there, I did become fond of a few of my schoolmates and of a few wonderful adult friends in the town, but never was able to develop any loyalty either to school or community. I did enjoy history, chemistry, and journalism classes and the teachers who led them. I joined only the Honor Society. At the end, I graduated with honors, but was far too shy to give the address, defaulting in the favor of a stolid, admirable girl, the product of local Lutheran schools who volunteered for all duties in student clubs and served all faithfully. Long before graduation, schoolmates began to talk of which college they would attend, with no planning or finances whatever. I somehow assumed I would attend college, that my grades would help to open the way. I even hoped to attend the most respected college in the state, Hendrix. I mentioned this to my nicest older confidant, the mother of a school friend. She and her kindly husband were University of Illinois graduates. Choosing words carefully, she told me that such a school was unsuitable for someone like me. Why this should be was unspecified. However, she was definite and had always been a benefactor and a guide to me and many other young persons. I accepted her word, but I still felt puzzled. What to do? Certainly, my family had neither plans nor resources. As graduation drew near, I turned panicky and walked into town to ask advice of the senior class sponsor, the most revered teacher in school. She seemed taken aback to see me standing there, told me to deal with it myself, and shut the door. I walked back down the railroad track to the rice mill in a despairing fog. I felt that my grades meant little after all. However, a newcomer from Helena, the lively wife of a director at the rice mill, had volunteered as our journalism teacher that year. Unknown to me, she clipped some of my editorials and feature stories from the student paper and entered them in a statewide contest for small tuition scholarships to a college in the hill country. Joyfully, she told me I'd received one. This gave me hope, a start. Also, during my senior year, Vida, still relatively normal, insisted that I enroll in a typing class. I did it, keenly aware of being the only male in a room full of girls. They thought it plenty strange, too. Local boys in that farming county didn't do such things. It made their masculinity suspect. Beside that, Vida put $5 down on a portable typewriter for me, which I finally paid out 2 years later. It took me too many years to realize that these three women, the Illinois graduate, my journalism teacher, and Vida, had helped ensure both my emotional and my physical survival, just as my grandmother's actions and character had earlier. By the time I realized this, it was too late to thank them. The next 3 years, in and out of college as I tried to improve my situation, became the usual student tale of too little money or too little study time. This climaxed when I dozed off driving to classes after the night shift at a defense plant and woke to find my old car bumping along in a grassy stretch. Shocked, I pulled back to the road shoulder and sat there, realizing that for me, full employment plus a full course load did not work. But student deferments mandated a full course load. Tired and dispirited, I decided then to let my deferment lapse and be drafted. The Korean War began in 1950, the summer after my freshman year in college. Many of my college friends that year urged me to join the local National Guard unit for the money. I really needed the cash. I was always hungry and seriously underweight, but my skeptical nature held me back. I disliked regimentation. I hated the idea of killing humans on any basis but ultimate self-defense. When the war broke out, my classmates in the Guard quickly shipped out for Far East. Being drafted meant 2 years of active service. Enlisting meant 3. As soon as I decided to be drafted, I assumed I'd either be killed in the conflict or would return to college on the GI Bill, which I hoped would finance me through an MA in English. I had switched from journalism in my second year. That there might be other dire outcomes never occurred to me. When I was first called up, a decision over a small traffic fine by a clerk at the induction center sent me home for some weeks. Entering the Army in January 1953, I managed to be assigned as permanent party at the training post by scoring high on proficiency exams. I turned down a chance to attend officer training school. My part of the deal was to help other trainees in my unit to cheat and to achieve high scores as well, thus furthering the career of the company CO. My typing ability also helped. The other trainees shipped out to Far East. As an outstanding trainee graduate, I was awarded a small prize, an ID bracelet, which turned green a few days later. I felt this fitting. I went on to finish 2 years of active service, my one dangerous scrape being almost shot in training by a boy from Little Rock. After an engineer training cycle and 6 weeks of clerk typist school, I managed to be regularly promoted up to E5, sergeant, to mostly evade the sadist to thrive in control systems, to weather a hurtful love affair, and to leave the service with a used station wagon bought partly with funds from managing the post theater off duty. The Korean War ceasefire took place in July 1953. In January 1955, I was released from active duty. I worked a few months in my old defense job, then in summer returned to Fayetteville, reading to catch up and planning to re-enroll for fall semester. On campus one day, I seemed to recognize someone ahead by her walk and called a name. As she turned, I saw it really was Lilybeth in summer school to earn a teaching certificate and help the family income. She just telephoned and was quite downcast because she couldn't afford the bus trip home and missed her husband. As she talked, an idea took shape, and I made a suggestion. Over the years, I'd often thought of the times in Baxter County. We agreed that I would drive her home, stay at the Blacks' farmhouse, and I could revisit my old haunts. So on Friday, we made the winding drive across the northern counties. I met her husband before he had to return to manage his state line gas station a few miles away. He seemed a hearty young man with a welcoming manner. He and Lilybeth were quite obviously devoted. I asked Mrs. Black about Bob. She said he and Clarice had married and gone into farming ranching some miles off. I decided to fish as well as roam. Mrs. Black said that as per my early suggestion, the Game and Fish Commission had successfully introduced trout to the Chili Dam tailwaters some years before. After our early Saturday breakfast, I donned Army fatigues, took fishing bag and fly rod from the station wagon, and set off across the ridge-top pasture for the shortcut draw to the river. The Chinkapin clump where I'd passed those painful, indecisive hours 9 years before still stood, but only as skeletal gray branches, unrotting like American chestnut, but likely killed by the same blight. I avoided glancing toward our old homestead. Lilybeth told me the new owners had put up a sign calling it Done Roving. Done roving. Thinking of my poisoned dog gave me a twinge. Descending the steep draw was dropping back through time. It seemed no one had used it at all. As I dodged poison ivy fronds swaying in the updraft, my tennis shoes broke loose hunks of the deep leaf duff on the jutting ledges. I ducked and traversed instinctively, inwardly reverting, feeling all that was changed in me since I last came that way. Illusions struck off like spalds from flint through work, the army, rejected love. I was not proud of myself. But this had not changed. The cool understory light, delicate as ever, the waves of leaf mold aroma, tales of death and rebirth. I hit bottom and broke into full sunlight against the overgrown railway embankment. The natural hedgerow of saplings, catbriers, berry brambles stood where missing rails had been. Something had kept a slender path across where it turned and paralleled the overgrown berm both ways. The tree line marking the island channel loomed lush and green only a few yards away. I crossed to it through sagegrass and bushes and picked my way downstream. I paused by a huge sycamore guarding the head of a long pool, high-banked on the near side, bordered by sand beds on the island side. A noisy rapid at the pool head had swept bare an expanse of tan bedrock. Hovering above it, in the liquid clarity shadowed by the sycamore, was a swarm of colorful fish, the first trout I'd seen aside from a state park or trout farm. At first glance, they seemed like gaudy painted suckers, but a single, much larger fish, silvery with pinkish lateral band, dominated the rest by aggressive turns and flashes. That must be a rainbow. I coveted that one. I eased up the bank and gingerly waded through the jumbled rocks of the rapid, noting in the shallows rolling swarms of scud, tiny crustaceans like sow bugs. These must be trout food, but none of the flies I had tied matched them. From the sandbar I tried not mine anyway, crouching and tossing a few low shepherd's crook casts far under the drooping sycamore, not a hint of response from any fish. I backed off and considered, bemused but impatient. I felt that in a way these were my fish. At least that my letter of years before may have helped me to produce them. That noble fish turning and scattering the others meant something significant. Catching it might in some way return me to a stage in time vital and hopeful, wipe out the done interim years. I felt sheepish and unsporting, but remembered my bait fishing days as a kid and went to a clod of half-buried leaves to dig a couple of fat worms. I rigged a number 8 hook on my leader tippet, went back and climbed into the low crotch of the squat sycamore, and flipped my worm rig into the rapid, letting it drift naturally into the strike zone. Then I took a deep breath, sagged against a smooth tree trunk, brushed off an exploring copper ant, and closed my eyes to slits. I relaxed utterly, half ignoring the wavering fly line on the eddy, letting go of inner tangles I'd hardly noticed. I was truly here again. The stunning summer earth was just as ever. At least I was out of the army. I hoped it was out of me. The fly line sprawled on the water surface, began to straighten in electric twitches. I forced myself to wait as it moved faster, then struck back sharply on the light rod. A few yards beyond the dappled shadow, the surface blew noisily apart, and a long gleaming shape sailed out in a complete somersault. I vaulted out of the tree crotch into startled fish and waist-deep water and floundered in pursuit. Every few yards, the fish again exploded into the air, widely scattering spray. Nearing the pool's end, it switched and raced back, the line whirring sharply as it cut the water. I reeled, stripped line fast, and staggered after. All I could do was keep a light pressure and follow. Shoal water at each end of the pool was forcing the fish to turn back. I'd have lost it at first if the turbines were running. With each leap, I dropped the rod tip to avoid breaking off. My arm began to ache a little, but the fish was tiring too. I was able to turn it gingerly at each run without giving much line. At the last, we were back at the pool's end and only feet apart. The beautiful slim fish made a final jump on the short line, more of a flip, really. Then in a final move, stunning me when success seemed so clear, so near, the tired creature turned its shining side and slid beneath a slanting balk of lumber from the dam. If the line caught, I'd lose it. I would not let that happen. I took a deep breath and went under right after. I came up gasping and back slowly onto the sandy beach, letting the fish flip itself out. I dropped the rod and scooped the fish into my arms. The hook fell out of the jaw hinge as I stumbled away from the water.